Hey guys, welcome back. If you're listening to this, it's probably late. The lights are dim, maybe you've got a cup of tea. Maybe you've got absolutely nothing but the quiet sound of history and mild regret that you didn't go to bed an hour ago. That's fine. Tonight we're taking a slow drift through one of the least restful topics imaginable: weapons. But don't worry, this won't be loud or fast or full of action. This is the gentle version. We'll be wandering through World War II's 5 most powerful weapons, the ones that reshaped the war, scared everyone half to death, and looked great in black and white newsreels. And yes, we'll be doing it in the calmest way possible. Think of it as a historical lullaby with tanks. So let's dim the lights a bit more and start with something heavy, loud, and completely impractical, just the way the Germans liked it. Weapon number 5, the Panzer VI Tiger Tank. Ah, yes, the Tiger Tank. If tanks had personalities, this one would be that guy in your friend group who insists on ordering the most expensive meal, complains that it's cold, and then breaks down halfway home. The Tiger First was Germany's attempt to make the perfect land monster. Designed in the early 1940s, it was meant to be unstoppable. Thick armor, a massive 88mm gun, and the kind of intimidating name you give something that costs a small fortune and rarely shows up to work on time. It first appeared in 1942, when German engineers decided that the earlier models, the Panzer III and IV, just weren't menacing enough. They wanted a tank that could shrug off Soviet shells like mosquito bites. The result was a 57-ton slab of steel that moved with all the grace of a refrigerator on gravel. Now, to be fair, when it worked, it really worked. Allied soldiers described hearing it before they saw it, that deep mechanical growl echoing through forests and fields. It could hit targets over 2 kilometers away, which in tank terms is like being able to throw a baseball across an entire neighborhood. But of course, there's always a catch. The Tiger had about as much reliability as a 1940s Wi-Fi connection. It broke down constantly. Its engine overheated, its transmission failed, and the sheer weight meant that bridges, those important crossing things, would sometimes just collapse under it. Crews had to treat it like an anxious pet. It needed attention, gentle care, and the occasional repair session in the middle of battle. The Allies didn't even have to destroy most Tigers. Half of them simply gave up on life halfway through a mission. Still, when it did work, it terrified everyone. The British had to come up with new tactics just to deal with it. The Soviets created the T-34-85 to even the odds, and Allied propaganda basically treated every Tiger like it was the final boss of a video game. Ironically, fewer than 1,400 were ever built, tiny compared to the tens of thousands of Shermans and T-34s. But the myth was larger than the number. Every time one showed up, morale dropped faster than its engine oil pressure. Let's just say it was the diva of tanks. Expensive, dramatic, and completely unforgettable. All right, let's roll slowly to something much smaller, but far more strategic. Weapon number 4, the Enigma machine. Now, the Enigma machine isn't technically a weapon, at least not in the boom sense. But in World War II, knowledge was ammunition, and this little box of spinning letters was one of the most powerful weapons of all. Picture it, a typewriter that refused to tell the truth. The German military used it to encrypt messages, creating codes so complex they made crossword puzzles look like toddler scribbles. Every day, the settings changed. Every letter typed turned into another, based on internal rotors that spun in a new pattern each time. To crack it manually was basically impossible, which, naturally, made the Germans a bit smug about their security. They were sending messages like, "We are totally winning the war. Don't tell anyone," and they genuinely believed nobody could read them. Enter the Allies, and a bunch of quiet geniuses sitting in a cold British mansion called Bletchley Park. Among them was Alan Turing, a mathematician whose hobbies included inventing modern computing and annoying bureaucrats. Turing and his team built the Balm, an early computer that could test millions of Enigma settings automatically. Bit by bit, they cracked the code. Suddenly, the Allies could read secret German messages, convoys, attacks, even Hitler's overconfident lunch plans. But here's the irony. They couldn't act on every decoded message. If the Germans suspected Enigma was broken, they'd change the system. So the Allies had to play dumb, losing some battles deliberately just to protect the secret. It's one of those quietly devastating facts of war. Knowing too much can be as dangerous as knowing nothing. By 1943, Bletchley Park's work was saving thousands of lives. The U-boats that once ruled the Atlantic were suddenly running into traps. Entire operations failed because someone, somewhere, had read the Germans' diary in real time. And all because of a little box that looked like it belonged in an antique shop. From quiet machines and cryptic letters to something that makes a lot more noise and a lot more fire. Weapon number 3, the flamethrower. Nothing says technological regression quite like strapping a tank of burning fuel to someone's back. The flamethrower was not new in World War II. The Germans had used primitive versions in World War I, but the 1940s turned it into a standard, terrifying tool. It worked exactly as it sounds. You point it, pull the trigger, and a stream of flaming liquid shoots out. Useful for clearing bunkers, trenches, and the will to live. Every major army had one: the Germans, the Americans, the Japanese. And while Hollywood loves to make it look glamorous, real soldiers hated them. Not for moral reasons, though there's that, but because carrying a backpack of flammable fuel was basically volunteering to explode. If a bullet or shell hit the tank, the operator became an instant firework. The lifespan of a flamethrower operator was, let's just say, briefly impressive. Still, the psychological impact was enormous. Entire enemy positions surrendered at the sight of it. In dense jungles or urban ruins, the weapon was brutally effective. The Americans used it heavily in the Pacific, where Japanese soldiers hid in tunnels and caves. The flamethrower solved that problem and created entirely new ones for humanity's collective conscience. After the war, it became one of those maybe we went too far inventions. By the late 20th century, most militaries stopped using them. Not because they didn't work, they worked too well. And so, the flamethrower remains one of those darkly fascinating relics of World War II. Simple, horrifying, and effective enough to haunt everyone who saw it in action. Let's cool down, literally, and move to something that soared rather than burned. Weapon number 2. The Supermarine Spitfire. Few machines from World War II inspire as much nostalgia as the Spitfire. It wasn't the fastest plane, or the most heavily armed, but it had the kind of aesthetic that makes aviation enthusiasts sigh wistfully. The Spitfire was Britain's darling, sleek, elegant, and just melodramatic enough to star in its own war film. Designed by R.J. Mitchell in the 1930s, it was built for one thing: agility. With its thin, elliptical wings and powerful Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, it could turn tighter than most enemy fighters and climb like it was late for tea. During the Battle of Britain in 1940, it became legend. German pilots respected it, feared it, and occasionally envied it. British propaganda turned it into a symbol of hope, a reminder that even when outnumbered, style counts for something. The Spitfire wasn't perfect. It was expensive to produce, fragile in rough weather, and guzzled fuel like a teenager discovering energy drinks. But it gave Britain what it needed: time, confidence, and a solid reason to keep fighting. pilots loved it. They described it as an extension of themselves, which is poetic, but also mildly concerning when you realize half of them barely survived the war. Over 20,000 were built. They fought not just in Europe, but across North Africa and Asia. And by the end of the war, newer versions could outrun almost anything. Even today, when one flies at an air show, the sound of its Merlin engine still turns heads. It's the lullaby of victory, a reminder that sometimes the most powerful weapons aren't the biggest, just the most beautiful. And now, let's end with the quietest, loudest weapon of them all. Weapon number 1, the atomic bomb.
You knew this was coming. The atomic bomb. The ultimate, maybe we shouldn't have done that moment in human history. By 1945, the war in Europe was over, but Japan was still fighting. The U.S. had been secretly working on a project so massive it had its own postal system, the Manhattan Project. Thousands of scientists, many of them refugees from fascist Europe, were building a new kind of weapon, one that split atoms instead of relying on gunpowder. The first successful test, in July 1945, lit up the New Mexico desert with a brightness no one was ready for. One observer said it looked like the sun rising twice. Another reportedly said, "What have we done?" A few weeks later, Hiroshima answered that question. Then, Nagasaki. The bombs killed over 100,000 people instantly, and many more from radiation afterward. Japan surrendered days later, and the world entered the nuclear age. It's hard to talk about the atomic bomb in a sleepy tone, but it's worth remembering that even the scientists were divided. Some believed it would save lives by ending the war quickly. Others saw it as the beginning of something uncontrollable. Both were right. In a single summer, humanity proved it could destroy itself and then immediately started building more of the same weapon, because apparently we never learn. Let's exhale for a moment. That was heavy, literally and metaphorically. From tanks that couldn't drive to bombs that changed the planet, these 5 weapons defined World War II. Not just through destruction, but through innovation, obsession, and the kind of terrifying creativity only humans are capable of. But that's enough thinking for tonight. Take a breath. Let the engines quiet down. The war can wait till morning. Good night, historians.